Another reason why the cement bricks are wonderful is you can use them in conjunction with T-posts, like I have done right here. And then if you have any old fencing or any kind of grid from an old gate or something, you can put that up as a trellis to let plants climb over them. My most favorite trellises are actual real arches, like this one. This kind of fence is a continuous panel that I have bent and just have it on both sides secured with the T-posts. And here is also a little bit sad looking this late in the year, an asparagus bean plant that is still climbing on here. Normally this is all really densely full of plants, more in the summer. But the only thing needed for this, T-posts are relatively cheap, and also they will not rot on you and are good for other things if you want to somehow disassemble this at some point. The only other thing, and this is not even needed, the zip ties, because I'm going to back off. You can see how the panel is arched. The panel wants to straighten itself, of course. It doesn't really like being bent like this. So it pushes out against the T-posts, and therefore it actually stabilizes itself. And there's a little bit of trick to do with the T-posts to make that work the best. But this is doable because the cement bricks have these holes, and I can pound the T-posts directly into the ground through one of those holes. So since we're talking about arches, here's another arch, and I have this one. There's a little bit of a dried old asparagus bean up there, but this one is constructed starting on one side on the 3 brick high bed, okay, and on the other side it ends up on the only 1 brick high tomato bed. Still, the T-posts are in to stabilize it, and I'm going to back out. Hopefully you can see the whole thing. You are totally flexible with this method. You can start high on one side, end up low on the other, and it will work just fine. So this is a narrower, taller arch because of it. Here on this bed that is tumbling because of the settling issue, I don't have an arch, but I still have put 2 T-posts in, and I have an old gate that I'm just using straight across the bed, and this is wonderful for cucumbers or beans or whatever. Here I have a little bit of a different configuration. I have an arch that I've put directly over the bed, so I have the option because of this to let something climb over the arch that would shade something else potentially that might grow directly in the bed. So again, this is another one of them Lego creative options. Here is another arch that sits on both sides, on each just a very low bed, 1 brick high, and there's a kiwi plant that is growing over it. So that also makes it very attractive for your garden. So here is yet another configuration. This is 2 arches right side by side for a grapevine that needs more, because each arch, each cattle panel I should say, which is what they are called, these panels, they aren't very wide. They are only, I think, 3 feet wide. So this grapevine gets really big in the summer, and so I have put multiple T-posts in here. In fact, on this side I have 3, on the other side I have 3. On one side it sits on the 1 brick high bed, on the opposite side it sits on a double high, and there are 2 panels directly next to each other, and they share the middle of the 3 T-posts. And I have simply put some zip ties so that these panels stay close to each other. Now that the grapevine has become bigger, it also helps holding the panels together. But this is yet another option that you have if you need a wider arch. One thing that's really important is when you go and buy the panels for your arches, which are available at stores like Tractor Supply or any other farm supply kind of store. They are called cattle panels. There are different types. So one very important thing to remember is that you see how the grid is fairly tight. There's maybe a 3-finger width. 4 ways it's that way, but then it becomes much wider. And you definitely want the type of panels that is not only with the narrow squares, because they do sell them too. There are some available. The entire panel's length would be these tighter squares. The reason you don't want them is they are so extremely stiff. They resist being bent a whole lot more than these do. Make sure you don't buy the only small squared type. I believe they might be called no climb wire. You would also be totally fine with, or even better, with a type of panel where all the squares would be so big like this, because for your planting need you don't need the tightness, and you don't want the excessive stiffness when you're trying to bend them and install them for your plants. As far as installing the panels for your garden, the installation is really self-explanatory. Once you have your T-posts in, the panel, of course, wanting to straighten itself, will push out against the T-posts, which if you have them in the ground nice and tight and in your bricks, then they won't go anywhere. If you're like me, that you want to make double and triple sure, you can put some zip ties here and there. Now, what you want to make sure when you put your T-posts in the ground is, as you see, the flat side of the T-post has these little teeth. They stick out. You want to pound the T-post in such a manner that the side with the teeth would be the side that the panel pushes up against, because that will further help it be stabilized. Sometimes T-posts, when you pound them in, they want to, as they go in the ground, they want to twist. They don't want to stay in exactly the position you want them. So you can see on this one how it's off to the side, even though I would have preferred the teeth to be more like this, but I don't know why this just worked out on that one, and I just didn't care to correct it. But typically this would be a good example. And then, as you can see, if that panel wanted to even slide up, which it can't really do almost because of the force of the arch, these teeth would further prevent it from doing so. That's really all there is to it. Nothing else. You don't have to put cement into the ground. Just pound them into the soil and then you're good to go. Now remember, I'm not a gardening expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I have done this particular way of gardening for 6 years. I don't have any previous experience, and I have had nothing but joy from this garden. And just go for it, okay? And enjoy.